I'll just acknowledge, thank you to all of our panelists for all of you brought your daughters tonight. How nice is that? And one of them has joined us up here secretly. So, next, we will welcome to our panel Diana Gonzales as the director of the Unaccompanied Migrant Children's Program at Leak and Watts Services. Is that pronounced? Inc. Diana is a staunch advocate for helping children in need in Westchester County and the rest of New York, whether it is migrant children or teens with emotional and behavioral challenges. When Diana isn't leading one of New York's only programs for unaccompanied youth, she is the mother of 2 girls and a student having received a master's degree in clinical psychology, a developing leaders diploma from the Columbia Business School, and recently is pursuing her MBA. Welcome, Diana. And please welcome Ridvan Foxhall. She is an educator, occupational therapist, and social entrepreneur. As a therapist, she works with children with special needs. She is the founder of the Peekskill chapter of Children's Theater Company and the owner of New Era Creative Space in Peekskill, a nonprofit dedicated to enriching the lives of children and youth, with her husband Eric. My husband's Eric too. She offers a monthly program called The Vision of Race Unity, Transcending Racism and Reimagining Race. Please welcome Ridvan Foxhall. Very good. Okay, I'm going to go. This is already on for you, ladies, and you do have to hold it pretty close to yourself, to your mouth when you speak. In a moment, I'm just going to turn over the mic to anybody here who has any questions for our panelists or wants to share any thoughts about the film. But I guess I'll just comment on something that struck me, and it's something that you and Ingrid, you and I have spoken about. Actually, your husband and John and I have specifically spoken about it. And it was something that the architect said. She said, "I'm not a woman architect, I am an architect." And I just wonder, language is such a powerful thing. Is there something in your lives and your careers that you're very mindful of the language that you use when you talk about yourselves in your career?
For me, specifically, I'm a writer when I do a gig. And it used to have to do this, I don't have to do it so much anymore. On the writer, it says, "Do not refer to me on any publicity events as female, woman, trumpet player. I think that people can figure it out themselves by the photo." So that's the basic little in brackets. I think the audience will figure it out on their own. So that's, I mean, it sounds silly, right? But it's true. Like, it's just all of a sudden you're put in this little box and separated from the 95 other trumpet players that probably sound, if we did a blindfold test, you couldn't hear the gender difference, I don't think. In instrumental music, if there's a vocalist, there's a hint there, but in my field, it's an interesting discussion, and it's a big one these days.
So I guess for me, it's we have to be very mindful that we serve a lot of children, a lot of girls who are coming from mostly South America, and I guess our goal is to really empower them, and by any means we make any reference in terms of gender, or how can they be less vulnerable or more vulnerable for crossing and doing all this journey. My field is mostly for females. It's very hard for me to find male clinicians. As a matter of fact, I'm looking for male clinicians, or any clinician as a matter of fact, but I think that it is part of, it depends on the field. And again, it is, for me, it is really creating that mindset that having 2 girls, right, be very, very mindful on how to not reinforce that comparison, right? That I do not compare them, I empower them by not comparing them to anyone, not females or not males. It's just by having them as unique human beings. So I think it's having that switch and being very mindful. I was raised in a very traditional culture in South America where the males are the ones who provide, right? Where females are okay to be home and not to work. So you grow up with that mindset. So it is hard to work on it, but my girls are my inspiration for that.
I think in the work that I do with young girls, I'm very conscious of just working and talking to them about mindset, changing mindset. Sorry. Yes, changing mindset and just like encouraging them to see themselves, to write their own narrative and to see themselves as individuals, not defined by society, but defined by the story that they write about themselves. So I'm very mindful in the way I talk to and work with young women. And for myself, I've been very fortunate. It's an interesting question because I don't, I am a woman, it's obvious, but it doesn't define who I am. And I was very fortunate to grow up with a very powerhouse of a mother and that was my role model. So I grew up feeling that I could do anything, and it wasn't because I was a woman, because I was Ridvan, who had this potentiality to do whatever I wanted to do. And so I've been very fortunate that way, and I try to impart that when I work with young women.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions? You want to kick us off?
Thank you very much for your volunteerism on our I have a question actually, specifically about the movie, but it's about my daughter, so maybe it applies. My daughter is actually the opposite. She's so aggressive. She goes to talk to her teacher when she feels she's been wrong. She goes to her coach. She goes to this one, that one. Kind of rubs people the wrong way because on some level she's a kid and all these other people have authority. And yet I don't want to tamp it down with that assertiveness. It'll help her in the future. What would you say to a daughter where you see that their goals are good, but their needs are erased? Because you do want to encourage those goals.
Well, I guess the question I would ask is, the words we use for girls who are assertive is aggressive. Would she be aggressive if she was male? Or would she be assertive? So I think we should be really careful when we are girls who are strong, because women we've been socialized to be quiet, to take the back, not to stand up for our own rights. So when a girl is assertive, she's considered aggressive. Don't be too assertive because you're a girl. I mean, I think we ought to encourage girls who stand up for what they believe in. That's assertiveness. And so we have to be really careful. When we're thinking about our daughters, if that was a boy, would we consider that aggressive? Because what is aggressive? So I guess you should define, is she really being aggressive or is she being assertive? And are we calling it aggressive because she's a girl?
I love the thing at the end where like they say, this is what an architect looks like. Well, this is what a jazz trumpet player looks like. And if you were to ask anybody off the street to draw a picture or describe what a jazz trumpet player looks like, 99% will say Louis Armstrong or Wynton Marsalis, which is fine. I have no problem with that. Those are people I've learned from and been mentored by. Some of the greatest African American jazz musicians on the planet embraced me immediately when they heard me play because they didn't see the color or the gender. But the funny thing about being a memorable person because of my gumption was that I actually ended up having to be a leader more than a side person, whereas most of my peers immediately out of college, some of my friends were like off playing with Art Blakey and all these great masters, and I realized I have no shot at that. Doesn't matter how good I play. So eventually I had to become a leader, and that goes to your daughter's assertiveness. For sure, people have said, oh, she's kind of bitchy. Oh, she's kind of tough. I'm like, I'm playing the trumpet. It's a very physical, and there's a million rainbows we can go to, like the little frou-frou kind of soft looping I was doing to really last night at the Zinc Bar in New York City at 12 o'clock at night, hitting super hard with a band of men. And this comes to the point where we do have to redefine what that assertiveness word is in our society. But there's also a place where, for me, I had to find a softness in all of my leadership so that I'm not coming across as this angry person. I'm just here to prove myself. So maybe with just time comes. Right? Learn to find the way to communicate in ways that get you what you want, but also communicate what it is you're trying to say as a leader. Big change going on.
So growing up myself, I was a pretty tough little girl because I have to say that I think in some ways I experienced, I was bullied when I was a little girl, and I think it was like a toughness that I created as well because I wanted to make my point across. I wanted to make sure that I was a strong person, a strong little girl, right? And I had my older brother who helped me to be very, also, I guess, strong on what I really wanted to get. And what I really, I think I was very fortunate because my parents saw that as a strength, right? And they empowered me. I do remember my father saying to me, one of the lessons learned is you do not ever allow anybody to take advantage of you, but you do not ever use your gender to take advantage of anybody. He was saying this when he was addressing issues between my brother and me. But those kind of words stick into my mind all along. And I guess the fact that he never disencouraged my personality, how strong I was, but gradually guided me on, is this the result? Is this the outcome you wanted to get? Maybe yes, but could have you done it differently? So that is like an ongoing conversation that I really appreciate, and I do the same. My 4-year-old is like in school. She's like me. I see her, and she's 4, and she's very she wants something and she'll get it. It doesn't matter how. And now that I'm kind of more prepared, I would know how to probably guide her a little bit. And there's never a way to say whether you're doing it the right way or the wrong way. But just use that as a strength on your daughter, because that's going to make her really, she's already assertive. I don't know how old she is, but I'm sure that's a good strength on her, and she'll find her way with your support and your guidance.
Thank you. I'll just chime in. I think the best thing you can do for your daughter is to discourage her from being that way, the way she really is, and maybe just make her feel like it's okay if sometimes she alienates people, because that's naturally what she's going to do. But it's definitely worth it for how far she's going to push herself to do great things that she wouldn't otherwise if she didn't have way more courage than she is probably easy for her.
I have a question for Ingrid. Did I hear you correctly, and did I understand you correctly, that if you had had easier access to play with the outstanding players in your field, then you would not have become a leader?
Yeah, in essence, if I'd been sitting around waiting to get the calls from certain musicians, I don't think I would have grown as quickly as I did as a result of some of the opportunities that came my way, such as getting a record deal when I was in my early 20s. And getting that record deal, I was able to have a little bit of power to hire those masters that I wanted to work with and the people that would make me a better musician.
How would you translate that as advice to others?
To not be afraid of doing something on your own. These women nailed it. They talked about a lot of embracing your fears, of fear of flying, all those things, to just go for it and not wait around for someone to lead you to that position. One of my early things that set off my career was a crazy moment in my life when Clark Terry and Al Gray, these legends, Lionel Hampton, you may have heard the name, asked me to sit in with them. And I was 20 years old. And I was super nervous, completely, ready to melt down from nervousness. And I just had to do it. It's like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And that led to a million opportunities unfolding. So embracing those horrible nerves that can really get in the way of your goals is part of it. And women do, young women, we have a lot of insecurities. It comes with the territory. And to work on them and to have wonderful men around is a great thing as well. I give much credit to a lot of the men who never hit on me. They were just like, get up there, play. It's very fortunate. They're out there.
I'd be curious to know any of the young women who are here tonight. Do any of you have an idea of what you would like to be when you're an adult? KJ, what would you like to be? World-class jazz guitar player?
It's on the list.
Yes, we've got a young lady up here who has a plan. What would you like to be? I would like to be a teacher. Anybody else want to be that?
Yes, a veterinarian.
A scientist. Oh, wow, great. Teacher, veterinarian, scientist, thanks. Well, maybe someday you'll be able to say, this is what a veterinarian looks like. Right? Thank you. Do you know what you would like to do? Not yet, okay.
Brenna said something.
Corinna, tell us.
It's okay.
I have one comment, and great to meet all of you.
Great to meet you.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you back. I thought it was a great film, and I just wrote a story yesterday because of something I'm going through, and maybe you might want to comment on what I think is important and was touched on in the film. But what failed? Everyone says, well, you know, I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm afraid to fail, and you mentioned it, and it's really scary to do a lot of things. And as I look at the things I've done, I'm coming on 60 years. That's why I wanted to be considered a young woman. You know, what should we expect? We're in a meme-heavy time. Every day on Facebook there are memes about, you know, chasing your dreams. But I think it's also important to recognize that there are days and there are times in a career, there are peaks and there are valleys. Now, that's what I think. So I'm just curious if you have a method to deal with, or maybe even less than failure, disappointment.
Well, just for the record, my loop didn't go very well up there. I was like, this is good. They're clapping on one beat, now my loop was totally wrong. But it kind of was awesome when the movie started because they realized, yep, that's what happens. You just have to put yourself out there. But I don't have an answer yet. I would like to hear their answers first.
I think that when I first came to this country, it was 14 years ago, 15 years ago, and I came with a plan I came as an intern for the organization I work at right now. And I came with that idea to supposedly to be trained and go back to my country, to give back what I learned. I was working with children with emotional disturbances, and that was my plan. And I think that I'm still here, obviously, after 14, 15 years, and I always felt at some point that I failed to that goal that I had of going back. I used to work with children in Colombia, and I used to work with females who were giving up their babies on adoption. And I think it was pretty impactful what I was doing there, and that was my hope, to really go back and give back to my country, my people in my country. So that was like in a way, like I can see probably like a failure in my goals. And I think I realized later that there is also vulnerable people. And the interesting thing about life is that now I'm working with children who are coming from Central America, from South America, from all over the world, who are really vulnerable as well. So it's like going into a circle, and now I'm feeling complete. I feel like I always felt I really, really want to work in a program where I can really help people the way I wanted to help people in Colombia. So it was, I guess that failure helped me to continue achieving more things and not like really, really continue working on my career. There is still a lot for me to work on and continue giving back to everybody who needs that. So I think that's the fuel. Sometimes those failures, it's just how you learn from that, and that moves you more. So that's kind of my experience.
I think, you're touching on two things here. There's failure and there's disappointment. Failure is something that I think if we teach our children and also for ourselves, we are perfectly imperfect beings. I mean, I think first of all we need to own that. We will fail. Failure is part of it. And we will fall, but the sun will come up tomorrow. That's what I tell my children. So failure actually can be seen as a stumbling block or a stepping stone, depending on your mindset. So I think we need to start to change our mindset about failure, particularly for women. Because women, we've been programmed to be perfect all the time. For men, they've been conditioned that failure is okay. You fail, you get up, you do it again. If you look at magazines or ads that target young boys and target girls. With boys, take risks, climb the mountain, do this. With girls, it's like, look good, look pretty. The magazines, it's amazing how different. Whereas boys are conditioned from very little. That failure is okay, taking risks is okay. You'll fall, you'll get up, you'll do it. Climb that mountain, do whatever. But girls are not conditioned the same way. So we have to be really careful from a very young age how we train up our girls and changing their mindset. So that's the thing about failure, is that we have the potential to get up and try again. We're human beings. But then there's disappointment. Often we get disappointed because we have all these assumptions and expectations about certain things. And therefore we get disappointment as an emotion. And it's, emotions are our, as I call it, our GPS, our internal GPS, And if we can figure out and learn to be emotionally intelligent and kind of work through our emotions, then disappointments will come. Life is full of disappointments, but like I always tell my children, the sun will come out tomorrow. I mean, when you think about weather, I use weather as an analogy. Sometimes it's, cloudy, and sometimes it's, it won't stop snowing, but the spring will come.
You know about that, right?
I'm hoping.
My iPhone says it's not coming over.
But eventually, so sometimes, when we have disappointments and failures, as long as we put it in perspective of the whole picture of our life, there'll be ups, there'll be downs, and really sometimes our greatness comes from when we're down. So when we can pick ourselves up and learn from that mistake and come back up and not stay there. I think as we raise up our children, it's important to let them know that yes, you'll be hit, you'll fall, but just be there to hold their hands and bring them back up. Because the sun will come out and hopefully spring will arrive.
I'm just adding a quick, this is a bizarre background story for myself though, but I was really fortunate. My parents weren't rich, but they made sure that we were busy because they knew that we would get in trouble if we didn't have a lot of things going on. But not in the way that kids are going from one event to another these days. We lived out in the country on the ocean, and I played the trumpet and I rode a horse. I had a horse and I played the trumpet, and then sometimes I'd play the trumpet and it just sounded awful. It was terrible. And I really knew somewhere in my brain, even though I had zero role models, like there was no woman I had seen a picture of playing trumpet ever. And my mom played the piano, and we had all these female singers and this energy around the house of piano players, but there was never this image in my head. So I was like, that trumpet sounded horrible. Where's that horse? Let me get out in the country. And I had this incredible, extreme of life, of an upbringing where I could just look up at the trees and kind of space out and ride through the forest and be along the ocean and take a deep breath and come back. And I think that's why the trumpet started to sound better, because I just put it away to the side. And then when it was time to pick it up, it was more of an extension of that other feeling that I was in. And it helped me to, had so many handicaps. Trumpet is a right-handed instrument. I am left-handed. That was one thing. So there was a lot of issues that I had, and I was so insecure. So 12 years old, I'm like, music in the head and nothing coming out. Just wanting to chuck it in the ocean. But I don't know if that helps, but just those extremes of going into nature and coming back and figuring things out, or having even just that space to get some more clarity is my message on that one.
I'll just give from a perspective of folks who run for elected office. Men will run for elected office with no experience. Nobody tells them it's a good idea. They may know nothing about the policies or the issues or how it works. And they will raise their hand and say, people will give me money, I'll do it. I'm a leader. Women will run for office after a decade of working on other people's campaigns, getting their master's in public administration, and waiting and waiting and waiting until they are the most qualified candidate that's ever run for the office that they're running for. And I didn't hold to that for myself, and I was the first woman elected mayor in the village of Ossining. It's a nice little village, and I love it, but I think that's probably typical in a lot of careers, that we lack the confidence to go out and be bold and pretend that we know more than we do, whereas men seem to be a little more willing to just kind of pretend. Yes, sir.
I was impressed with the part of the movie where the girl in the running program said that she was the boss of her own brain. And the story the mathematician told about like girls getting the message that they shouldn't be good at math at a certain point. I'm wondering about how, if any of you have experience with explicitly saying you've been taught things that aren't true.
So I don't remember being explicitly told about things that I shouldn't do as for being a girl or a female. But I connected very well with that story of the mathematician, because one of the things that I remember is that maybe it was more in the air, but I got into my mind that I was not good at math, and that I was never going to do math, and I created this rejection and about math, and maybe that's why I decided to study psychology. So with my girls, the first thing that I did is they need to do Kumon, and they need to learn and have fun with math, and they need to do, like it's learning that through my experience, but I don't think I explicitly, but I guess it's more in the context, in school, and you knew who the boys were good for this and the girls were good for that, and you grew up with that, right? And to me, it's being so aware, because I happen to have two girls and a fantastic husband who we don't have stereotypes or we just feel they're the way they are, genuine and unique, right? But there is definitely that as part of the culture for me.
I'm just thinking of growing up. I have two sisters, an older sister and a younger sister, where we all played music in our house. It was just the norm. We were expected to pick up an instrument and play. That was mom. So fortunately, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but fortunately my parents split up when I was very young. And because my dad was like, no way, music is not a real thing to do. That's not a job. And he was completely against everything I did, even up until college. And it was an interesting thing to take command of my own brain and say, this is my passion. And that was another thing they touched on in that movie that I think is crucial, is when there's any passion on any level, to feed that fire, so that the message of negativity is outweighed by the feeling of, man, this math is fun, or this trumpet is fun, and this guitar, or whatever, this running thing is amazing, and that takes me into this other place, and there's a fire and a warmth that comes with that feeling of being.
And you. And I also started to do programs like engineering for kids and architecture for kids and different programs and we also do theater arts and different programs. But inevitably, architecture for kids, engineering for kids, or anything to do with math, science, or whatever, will have 90%, really, or maybe even 99%, or no girls sign up. And it's all for the past 5 years, and it's really frustrating. So I wonder if society, even parents, without thinking about it, we're conditioning our girls to be like, if we have dance, or if we have art or theater, mostly girls. Gymnastics, girls. I don't do gymnastics there, but it's just interesting that we start from a very young age. Like we have engineering for kids for 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds and 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and it's all boys, not a single girl. We'll have 10 boys and no girls, or maybe there'll be that one girl. So, and I love the arts. I'm an artist, so and it's very important that they get both. But we don't encourage girls to do, society doesn't encourage girls to pursue the sciences and the, math and sciences. Whereas we are quick to sign them up for anything where they look pretty and they're twirling around and they're, so we're living up to society's expectations of what a girl should be and what boys, boys can problem solve and think creatively and build things, but girls should not be doing that. So I think we should start to be conscious about, with our young children, what kind of opportunities that we're giving them. And it shouldn't matter if they're boy or girl. It's like they should have both. And I think for boys too, the boys definitely need the arts. They need to dance, they need to do art because it's good for their soul. And girls need to do science and math, and because it's good for them. There has to be a balance. We should sign our kids up for stuff because we just want them to have the experience, not because they're a boy or a girl.
Yes.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, I'm a mom of 2 young boys, and lately I've been thinking a lot about what my role is in raising up boys who support female empowerment, but also how to do that in a way that doesn't leave them feeling shame about their gender and disempower themselves. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about that.
And thank you for
Being inspirational.
Well, as an educator in the music field, this is a big discussion right now. Is that there's this new sensitivity to the way we're discussing how someone behaves within the teaching environment from college, from university level all the way down. I'm coming from jazz. It's kind of a nasty language, really. It's got its dark sides as far as where it came from, but it is an art that encompasses the sound of the world to me. It is an art form and a music form that is drawing from everything, and all of my heroes were stellar human beings operating on a very high level of consciousness. So when I am working with students either at the New School, where I teach right now, or I was just in Monterey for a week working with the Monterey Jazz Festival, this next gen, it really is the next gen too, next generation of young people. I just try to absolutely be the best role model I can be overall, not trying to single out, I'm just here for the girls, or let me make sure those boys are behaving properly. And I think music is a wonderful way to be able to communicate this, because it just is this thing you get to channel together on a stage with a bunch of people, oftentimes that you haven't even played with before. And so for them to see that level of communication and everybody to be treated on a truly equal platform, it's the most inspiring thing ever, and it is changing. And I don't think we need to make, my point really here is I don't think we need to make too much out of it. Like a huge conversation, it starts to get complicated. And I think just playing together, jamming together, and getting in these situations, doing physics and engineering and having these conversations is what it's about. And we hone in too much on, oh yeah, girls are bad at math, and boys are good at math. It's all of a sudden, boom. Girls can't play trumpet. Yes, they can. You should see all the trumpet players now, and all the young men who actually came up to me at this last festival and were just like, oh my God, it's Ingrid Jensen. I'm like, wow, this is new. This is really new. Something's changing, and it's really exciting and really encouraging. I don't know how it is in other fields, but
So I think language is very important, and I think that you don't want to expose your boys to something where they're going to feel uncomfortable, as you said. You don't want them to not be themselves, right? And they probably had already created different stereotypes based on their relationship with other kids in the school or somewhere else. I think that it's important what you do at home and how you can, that those conversations happen where, again, we go back to the mindset of being mindful on what language do we use? How do we refer to things, even in our homes? What is the definition that we have for gender, for different things, and it has to be at home. As I said, I grew up in a very traditional culture, but I was fortunate to have parents who were supportive, open-minded. So there was never in my house this concern about my older brother playing with dolls with me. Whereas in different homes that we've seen, like, how can this happen? So maybe he would not play with dolls with his friends, right? Because that would be too much. But he knows now that, it's part of him, and he knows he's a role model for my girls. Because again, in our home, the language that we used, that what we heard, what we saw, right, was very impactful for us, and how to see that. So make your home a safe space for them to be whoever they want, and they're going to be comfortable in their own skin, whatever they are outside of your home.
I think in terms of raising boys, I watched a really fascinating TED Talk recently by Eve Ensler from the Vagina Monologues and the V-Day. She started the whole V-Day. But what she's doing in the world for the empowerment of women is pretty amazing. But anyway, she started her talk by saying that the girl gene, humanity has taken out the girl gene, which is that ability to be compassionate and to be to use our intuition, to be empathetic. We've taken that out of the equation, which is part of the cause of all the wars in the world right now. Is that those are qualities where women are strong in, but the problem is we've taken it out. So those qualities are like, and we teach boys, don't cry, don't be emotional, don't be compassionate, you have to be tough, you have to, we teach them all of these hard qualities, and we forget that, we need those soft female qualities of compassion and empathy to set things in balance. And I think as we're raising our boys, we need to be really careful and make sure that it's okay to be compassionate. We need our emotions. Our emotions, as I say, is like our GPS. Boys need to cry. Boys need to, they're human beings. If they are hurt, they should feel those emotions, because that's the only way they'll move forward. And I think society worldwide has taught boys not to feel. And I think as long as we teach boys to feel and to be empathetic, they'll be fine. They can be strong too, but they have to be, we have to teach them to be compassionate. And then we have to stop telling girls that, you're too emotional, or you're too compassionate, or, the world needs that. And when we have those emotions and those qualities of compassion and empathy in politics, then things will start to change. Because oftentimes what happens is when women, we push women to go for their career or whatever, and then they start to become more like men. Because they start to become hard, because that's the way, to make it forward. And we need to stop that. We need women to get into all these arenas of different professions with all of their emotions and all of their compassion and all of their empathy and change the way things are. And maybe we'll start to see a balance in the world.
Thank you so much. You know, I for one am standing here today and listening to your stories and thinking about women who have been role models to me in my life. And sometimes it's people that are integral to who I am. It's people in my family or people in my community. And sometimes it's people that I barely knew. I barely knew Sandy Galiff. I never met her when I was growing up, but she used to represent North Tarrytown where I grew up, and she and my mom served a junior league together, and then she ran for county legislator. And so my mom got on her mailing list, so we would get her Christmas cards, and my mother still has magnets on her refrigerator. And so Sandy Galiff was a role model for me, and she'd never even met me until I moved to Ossining and I was an adult. So I leave that with you because I realize that we may be representing ourselves and being role models to people every day, any given day of our lives, and not even realize it. So thank you all so much for sharing your stories. I'd like to hear one final word from all of our panelists this evening.
I'm very grateful for being here. I realized as I was here that this is the very first time that I have to ever talk about this particular topic. I think it is very important to talk about this. It is really great that that these kind of things happen, and I feel that we also have to be careful on not going all the way to feel that it is what, and I'm saying this because my daughter said it once. She heard somebody saying that women are the best and we are, and that's wonderful, that's great, but then she says, Mommy, men are great too. So she has, obviously, my husband as the male figure, right? She's very, very connected with him, and I realized that we also have to be very mindful.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in a half hour. Please note that the computers will be shutting down in about 15 minutes. Please save all your work.
So we just have to be very mindful not to go to the other side and just create a balance, as my co-panelist mentioned, and to be very mindful of how we say it and what we say and what impact we create, because we definitely create an impact on males and females.
I don't know. What can I say except that we have to be looking out for each other on all levels. Looking out. What I ideally am so thankful for right now is just being in this community and having people around me who my daughter can interact with, and we can create jam sessions and just start getting that passion for whatever, whether it's sledding in our backyard when the snow sticks, or on the swing, the crazy swing my husband built, or having barbecue, or having a jam session and just letting all the kids go nuts in the basement, hit all the instruments. That's a nice foot. That's really nice. Yeah, you're on public TV. Can you stop that? And I don't know, this community really inspires me to do more as far as getting more of these discussions going and meeting more of you wonderful people. Thanks for having me too.
I don't have much to say, but thank you for having me here. I just this week, Paul, contacted me and we needed someone to sit in for the panelists that couldn't make it. So I'm very honored that I was able to come here tonight and share my thoughts with you all. And I just would like to say that, just for all of us to constantly, conscientiously check our assumptions about men and women or different races and people, because the first, sometimes like the architect was saying, this is what an architect looks like. Our assumptions always like a scientist or an astronaut to jump to conclusions. So I think we should be really conscious about, the conclusions and the assumptions that we jump to, because oftentimes it is guided by what our society, we live in society and we are part of it, so our assumptions are part of it. And the same with race, our assumptions are a part of it. And we really have to be very careful to check our assumptions before we jump to conclusions and be willing to have that assumption be blown out of, out of the water, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing all of you for the April screening, which is a special Friday night screening. It's April 27th, and that's an inconvenient sequel. And oh, yes, sir. Did you have a final question?
I just wonder if it's possible to become a friend of the series now, or you have to do it before the movie.
It is possible to become a friend of the series on your way out of the theater. There's a beautifully decorated box on the table with butterflies, and there's little handcrafted envelopes out of reused paper where you can tell us your name and your email address, and then you'll get to see your name in lights on one of the slides before our next screening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Paul, for that final reminder. And if our panelists could just stay for 1 minute, if the committee could please come down so we can